When the steel door slammed shut for the last time, everything went silent. No voices. No footsteps. Just the sound of his own breath bouncing off concrete walls. For 15 years, Daniel Cole lived in a box no bigger than a parking space, 8 feet long, 6 feet wide. No windows, no clock, no color. Only time, stretching endlessly. He would count the screws in the wall just to remember what numbers felt like. He'd talk to the ants crawling under the door, because they were the only things that moved freely. On the 3,000th day, Daniel forgot what his mother's voice sounded like. On the 4,000th, he stopped remembering her face. But the worst day wasn't when he lost track of time. It was when he realized the prison guards had too. To them, he was just the guy in cell 12B, the one they said was too dangerous for human contact. Daniel wasn't a monster. He was a man who'd made one terrible mistake. It all began in 1995, when Daniel, then 24, was sentenced to 25 years for armed robbery. It wasn't supposed to go this way. He wasn't even the one holding the gun, but when you're there, you're guilty. His lawyer told him to take the plea, said he'd be out in 10 with good behavior. But life inside wasn't made for good behavior. 2 months after entering Iron Gate Correctional Facility in Texas, Daniel got into a fight. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. A bigger inmate tried to steal his food, and Daniel pushed back. One punch turned into a brawl, and before he knew it, guards were dragging him away. The next day, he was moved to administrative segregation, ADSEG, the place inmates called the invisible prison. That's how it started. The first few days weren't too bad. He told himself it was just for a week. He counted the meals. He sang songs under his breath. But after a month, something inside him began to break. The silence was heavy, thick, like air that didn't move. He'd press his ear to the steel door, trying to catch the faintest echo of another voice. Sometimes, when a guard passed, he'd whisper, "Hey, can you tell me the date?" But they rarely answered. By year 2, Daniel's world had shrunk to the size of his cell. His thoughts became his only company. He started drawing shapes in the air with his fingers, imaginary pictures that only he could see. Then came the hallucinations, voices calling his name from the vent, footsteps that weren't there, shadows crawling across the wall. He'd scream for someone to check, but nobody came. He wrote letters, hundreds of them, to the warden, to lawyers, to the state board. Most were never mailed. Some came back unopened. It was like shouting into a void. Still, Daniel clung to hope. He made a schedule, 50 push-ups every morning, 100 squats by night. He recited poems he remembered from school just to keep his mind alive. When he couldn't sleep, he'd imagine himself walking through grass, barefoot, free, the sun on his skin. But one night, after 13 years, something inside him finally gave out. He woke up and couldn't remember his own name. He tried writing it on the wall, but the letters didn't look right. He cried, silently, for hours. Then came the noise. A strange sound echoing from the hallway, the sound of a key turning in a lock that hadn't been used in years. Daniel sat up, heart racing. The door creaked open slowly, light spilling in. A guard stood there whispering, "Pack your things." Daniel blinked, confused. "Am I free?" he asked. The guard didn't answer. He just motioned for Daniel to step out. As Daniel crossed the threshold, his legs trembled. The light burned his eyes. He hadn't seen the sun in almost a decade and a half. But as he took his first step into the hallway, he noticed something strange: rows of empty cells, doors rusted shut, silence thicker than ever. He turned to ask where everyone went, and that's when he saw it. At the end of the hall was a door with a faded sign that read, "East Block, closed." But faintly, beneath the peeling paint, another word had been scratched in. "Solitary." Daniel froze. The guard whispered again, "You were never supposed to survive this long." The lights flickered. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Daniel turned. Daniel's knees almost gave out as the guard led him through the dim corridor. The air was cold, thick with dust and bleach, the smell of years forgotten. His heart pounded as the heavy doors shut behind them. For the first time in 15 years, the echo wasn't just his own. They passed cell after cell, each one empty. The silence felt alive, pressing down on him. Daniel glanced at the guard walking beside him, a young man maybe 30 with tired eyes. The guard's badge read, J. Harlan. Daniel's voice cracked, weak from years of disuse. "Where is everyone?" Harlan hesitated. "Most of them didn't make it out, Cole." Daniel stopped walking. His throat tightened. "Didn't make it out? You mean they were transferred?" Harlan shook his head. "No. They died in here. Most from the inside out." Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. "Why me?" The guard sighed, glancing over his shoulder before speaking. "Because you survived. You're living proof the system's broken." They stopped in front of a steel door marked Archives, restricted. Harlan unlocked it quietly, motioning Daniel inside. Inside the room were dusty files, stacks of folders, and rows of boxes stamped with prisoner numbers. Harlan pulled out one, #1219B, Daniel's number. He placed the file on the table. "You were supposed to serve 18 months in solitary," Harlan said softly. "But paperwork got lost. Staff changed. Nobody noticed you were still down there." Daniel's stomach dropped. 15 years, because of a mistake? Harlan nodded. "They call it administrative oversight." Daniel stared at the file, yellowed pages filled with guard reports, incident logs, and psychiatric notes. At the bottom was a red stamp, "Inmate unfit for reintegration." He whispered, "They forgot I existed." Harlan looked down, guilt washing over his face. "The system forgot a lot of people, Cole. You're just one of the few who lived to tell it." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the fluorescent light was the only sound. Then Harlan slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "There's a journalist waiting outside. She's been trying to get someone to talk about this place for years." Daniel hesitated, fear flickering in his chest. He'd dreamed of sunlight, of open air, but now that freedom was close, it felt unreal. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Harlan's eyes softened. "Because my father was here too. They called it the cage. He never made it out." The name hit Daniel like a punch. The cage. That's what the older inmates used to whisper about, the part of the prison nobody came back from. He thought it was just a rumor. But now, standing here, surrounded by ghosts of files and forgotten names, he realized it wasn't a myth. It was real. As they walked out of the building, Daniel squinted against the sunlight. The outside world looked strange, colors too bright, sounds too sharp. The wind brushed against his skin, and for a second he almost couldn't bear it. At the gate, a woman with a camera waited. Her name was Rachel Lawson, an investigative reporter from New York. She looked at Daniel, disbelief in her eyes. "You're the one they kept in solitary for 15 years? He nodded slowly. She lifted her microphone. "Tell me what it was like." Daniel took a deep breath. His voice trembled, but it was steady enough to carry. "It's not just a cell," he said. "It's a place that erases you. They say solitary keeps people safe, but all it does is break them. You stop being human in there. You become a shadow." Rachel's camera rolled as Daniel spoke, about the days that never ended, the guards who forgot, the silence that screamed. His story spread like wildfire, sparking outrage across the country. News outlets called him the man who lived in the dark. Senators demanded investigations. Civil rights lawyers filed lawsuits. But Daniel didn't care about headlines. He didn't want fame or pity. All he wanted was to make sure no one else disappeared the way he did. Months later, a federal order shut down Iron Gate's solitary wing. It was condemned, rusted doors welded shut forever. But the scars remained. One night, Daniel returned to the empty lot where the prison once stood. He stood there quietly, feeling the wind against his face, the sound of leaves moving, life in motion. For the first time in decades, he smiled. He whispered to the wind, "You can't cage a man's soul forever." And as he walked away, the faint hum of the past faded behind him, the sound of steel, the echo of footsteps, and the ghost of the cage, gone, but never forgotten.